The Nile Valley roots and the primordial matrix, the cosmic schism that split the primordial consciousness of the African continent, finds its most harrowing, visceral expression in the spiritual warfare between the matriarchal architects of creation and the rising patriarchal vanguard. This conflict, allegorically archived within Yoruba cosmology as the great standoff between Oladumare and Ogun against Oshun, represents more than a mythological dispute. It is the esoteric record of a cataclysmic civilizational shift. It marks the violent fracturing of the original organic harmony between the black man and the black woman, initiating an era of systemic gender warfare where physical and metaphysical violence became tools of territorial and spiritual subjugation. To trace the genesis of this gender war, one must look northward to the Nile Valley, where the ancient lineages of Seti and the stellar empires of Kush and Meroe established the foundational blueprints of matriarchal spirituality. In these primordial societies, governance was directly tethered to the cosmic womb, and the Kandakes, queens of Meroe, ruled not merely as political monarchs, but as living extensions of the celestial firmament. The social order was inherently matrilinear, rooted in the understanding that the continuity of life, energy, and cosmic resonance flowed directly through the biological and spiritual architecture of the Divine Mother. The Meroitic script itself operated as an intricate cryptographic code designed by these ancient matriarchs to map the movements of the stars, the resonance of the earth, and the biological blueprints of human consciousness. Far from being a mere tool for mundane record-keeping, this script functioned as a vibrational technology, locking the sacred mysteries of the goddess firmament into physical stone and papyrus. Through this sacred literature, the matriarchs of Meroe preserved the memory of a time when the earth was attuned to the magnetic, fluid energies of the cosmic waters, long before the advent of the iron-driven mechanisms of dominance. As time progressed, a profound cosmic and sociological shift swept across the continent, displacing the quiet, magnetic resonance of the Nile Valley and paving the way for the aggressive, electric structures of the West African Iron Age. This transition marked the slow, often bloody overthrow of maternal-led systems by paternal governance structures, a mutation that altered the very fabric of indigenous spirituality. The ancient unity was broken, and the harmonious dialogue between the masculine and feminine principles degenerated into a bitter, existential struggle for cosmic and earthly supremacy. The Yoruba cosmic schism, Oshun versus Ogun. Within the sacred geometry of the Orisha tradition, this historic rupture is encoded in the famous narrative of Oshun's exclusion by the male deities, an allegory that directly mirrors the historical silencing of the ancient matriarchs. When the male orishas, led by the aggressive, industrializing directives of Ogun and sanctioned by a shifting concept of Oladumare, attempted to organize the world without her input, they were executing a patriarchal coup. Oshun did not merely argue, she withdrew her vital waters, her sweetness, and her fertility from the cosmos, demonstrating that the structural universe cannot function when the maternal matrix is discarded. The evolution of Oladumare within this context reveals the gradual distortion of the supreme deity, from an all-encompassing, genderless cosmic womb into a distant, detached patriarchal authority. Originally aligned with the infinite potential of the dark cosmic void, the ultimate primordial mother, the concept of Oladumare was subtly rewritten over centuries of male-led governance to legitimize the rule of kings and warriors. By placing Oladumare at the apex of a strict, hierarchical pyramid that prioritized the mechanical execution of the male orishas, the patriarchal order effectively severed humanity's direct link to the nurturing horizontal networks of the matriarchy. Ogun, the master of iron technology and warfare, stands as the ultimate archetype of this patriarchal transformation and the primary agent of the violence that ensued. His emergence represents the introduction of metal weaponry, the violent clearing of sacred forests, and the implementation of a rigid, linear order that sought to chain the wild, intuitive forces of nature. In the context of the ancient gender wars, Ogun's iron is the literal and symbolic instrument used to pierce the sacred veil of the matriarchy, replacing the magnetic, free energy systems of the ancient world with blood sacrifice and physical conquest. This metaphysical clash inevitably crystallized on the physical plane of the African continent, manifesting as a historical cycle of black-on-black violence that specifically targeted the sovereign black woman. As the ancient matrilinear lineages were forcibly dismantled to make way for patrilinear property ownership, the sacred status of the woman was systematically degraded. The literal killing of black women by black men, encoded in the aggressive myths of Orisha conquest, reflects the historical reality of queens deposed, priestesses silenced, and the womb-centered temples of the Nile Valley desecrated by invading iron-bearing infantries. Esoteric warfare, symbolism, and cartography. From the perspective of matriarchal spirituality, this intraracial violence is viewed as a form of spiritual matricide and self-inflicted fratricide, born from a profound collective amnesia. When the black man turned his iron weapons against the black woman, he was effectively attacking the very biological and cosmic source of his own power and genetic continuity. This rupture created an enduring trauma within the collective consciousness of the continent, leaving a scar that continues to manifest in modern social dysfunctions, domestic warfare, and the fragmentation of the sacred family structure. The ancient cosmological maps preserved by Nile Valley mystics suggest that this earthly gender war was accompanied by a catastrophic shift in celestial cartography and magnetic resonance. The matriarchs taught that the Earth's alignment with the goddess firmament was disrupted when the masculine principle decoupled from the feminine guidance system, causing a metaphorical fall or tilt in the planetary axis. This shift disrupted the natural atmospheric conductors that once allowed ancient societies to harness free, ambient energy, plunging the world into a dense, material age ruled by scarcity, conflict, and physical labor. The energetic warfare between Oshun and Ogun is chemically and mineralogically coded into the earth itself, represented by the eternal tension between brass and iron, sweet waters and spilled blood. Oshun's brass reflects the solar magnetic light of the primordial sun, a highly conductive metal that resonates with the fluid, healing frequencies of the womb and the copper-rich currents of the Nile. Ogun's iron, conversely, represents density, separation, and the cold extraction of resources, a heavy mineral that, when overemphasized, poisons the soil and turns the sweet waters of community into stagnant, blood-soaked battlegrounds. The monumental architecture of Meroe, characterized by its steep, stellar-aligned pyramids and hidden chambers, stands as a silent, stone testament to the defensive strategies of the ancient matriarchs against this patriarchal encroachment. These structures were designed as massive biological and astronomical anchors, engineered to keep the channels between the Earth and the celestial mothers open despite the rising tide of the Iron Age. The inscriptions on these walls, written in the enigmatic Meroitic script, contain the final desperate formulas needed to reactivate these ancient grids and protect the maternal DNA from total corruption. The historical mutation and genetic trauma, reinterpreting the Orisha literature through this Nile Valley lens, transforms these stories from harmless folklore into a stark, literal archive of a planetary social mutation. The myths describe deities cutting off each other's heads, cursing lands with drought, and engaging in fierce magical duels because they are recording the actual, cataclysmic overthrow of an advanced, peaceful civilization. It was a war fought not just with physical spears, but with vibrational frequencies, where the ancient chants of the matriarchs were gradually drowned out by the thunderous drums of patrilinear war cults. The biological warfare element of this historical transition cannot be understated, as the suppression of the matriarchy directly impacted the genetic and spiritual transmission of power. In the original Meroitic paradigm, the royal and spiritual essence was passed down through the mitochondrial DNA of the mother, ensuring that every ruler remained intrinsically connected to the cosmic origin. By violently disrupting this lineage and enforcing patrilinear succession, the patriarchal forces effectively altered the genetic resonance of the leadership, leading to an era of rulers who governed through fear, military might, and extraction rather than divine harmony. The physical violence and loss of life that characterized the climax of this transition left an indelible imprint on the collective psyche, establishing a blueprint of trauma that echoes through generations. The historical overthrow of the Kandakes and their priestesses was not a peaceful transition of power, but a brutal campaign that saw the systematic execution of those who refused to bow to the new iron-centered paradigm. This ancient bloodshed established a terrible precedent, normalizing the victimization of the black woman by the very men who were once sworn to protect the sacred matrix from which they emerged. As the patriarchal order solidified its grip, the depiction of the orishas was thoroughly sanitized to hide the true extent of this cosmic and physical warfare. Oshun, once a fierce primordial dragon mother of the deep waters and an architect of cosmic law equal to any creator, was systematically reduced in the popular imagination to a superficial goddess of vanity, beauty, and romance. This reductionist portrayal served a political purpose. By stripping the goddess of her absolute authority and her terrifying world-halting power, the patriarchal structure sought to convince women that their only leverage lay in sexual seduction rather than cosmic sovereignty, reclaiming the cosmic balance. Yet, the core of the mythic tradition still acknowledges Oshun's ultimate triumph and the inherent vulnerability of the patriarchal structure. When the world withered to dust and the iron machines of Ogun rusted into uselessness because of her absence, the male deities were forced to realize that their power was entirely parasitic upon the life-giving matrix of the feminine. This realization forced a desperate, conditional reconciliation, demonstrating that patriarchy, for all its military might and structural dominance, is ultimately an unsustainable system that cannot survive without the vital fluids of the mother. From the cryptographic perspective of the Meroitic scholars, the current state of division between the black man and the black woman is a reflection of a fractured cosmic consciousness that can only be healed through a precise linguistic and spiritual restoration. The symbols embedded within the ancient scripts of the Nile Valley provide the exact vibrational formulas needed to deprogram the mind from the illusions of the Iron Age. By studying these allegorical records, modern seekers can decode the true nature of the ancient gender war, identifying the exact points where the harmony was broken and the violence began. Today, the systemic echoes of this ancient spiritual fracture manifest in the ongoing crises plaguing relationships, families, and communities across the global African diaspora. The contemporary struggles between men and women, characterized by a lack of trust, economic warfare, and physical vulnerability, are the direct descendants of the ancient clash between Ogun's iron and Oshun's waters. Without a conscious return to the foundational balance established in the early days of Seti and Meroe, the collective remains trapped in a looping, historical script of self-destruction and internal conflict. The ultimate resolution of this multi-millennial gender war lies not in the total elimination of one principle by the other, but in a profound, systematic restoration of the matriarchal foundation to its rightful place at the core of human cosmology. When the black man lays down the destructive, unguided iron of Ogun and resubmits his strength to the celestial life-giving laws of the primordial mother, the original Nile Valley alignment can be reborn. Through the decoding of the Meretic legacy and the reclamation of Oshun's absolute cosmic authority, the waters of creation will once again wash away the bloodstains of history, healing the rift between the king and the queen under a restored eternal firmament.